Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Suzanne Nelson. I am a novelist and a speaker, and I'm so excited to be here at the Spiritual Growth Virtual Summit, the Thrive With Me 2023. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I hope that you've really been enjoying the speakers all day. I know that I've been able to pop in and out of a lot of talks, and it's been really refreshing and filling me with great hope. So, um, let's get started. So, going into 2022, I knew it was going to be a rough year. I ended 2021 with the diagnosis of the BRCA1 mutation, which was a complete surprise to me. So, the BRCA1 mutation is the breast cancer gene. And it's not just breast cancer, it's breast cancer and pancreatic cancer and ovarian cancer and skin cancer and all sorts of other kinds of cancer. So I knew going in that I had a lot that I was going to be doing to prevent as many of these cancers as I could prevent. So that meant lots of surgeries and lots of procedures. But I had a plan and I had lists, and my planner was just, it was filled with appointments, and I knew what I was doing. I was in control. So it all was going along fine. I'd had many surgeries and I had this one big surgery remaining, and it was scheduled for the end of October. I was getting myself all ready, all psyched up for this. And the doctor's office called and said they had to postpone it until November 11th. And I felt devastated, completely devastated, because it had taken me off of my path, the path that I was creating for my year. Well, it turns out that you're not going to be surprised, but God knew better than I did what was good timing, what was the right timing. Because as it turned out, on October 11th, as I was sitting down having dinner with friends at a local restaurant, my husband called me. And when I answered the phone, I knew it was him because, cell phones, they tell you who's calling. Um, but when I answered it, his voice was different. And he just kept saying, I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. So he had been out on his quad, burning off some stress out on the four-wheeler. For those who don't know what a quad is, it's an ATV. And he'd hit a cable and flipped the quad over. So a friend of mine and I, we rushed out. We borrowed another friend's car, and I used our family tracking device to find him. And when I found him, the image that I saw, it's frozen in my brain. I don't think on this side of heaven I will ever be able to forget what I saw. It was bad. It was very bad. I called 911. The ambulance came. They wouldn't let me ride with him, so we followed them to the hospital. And it was one of the scariest times of my entire life because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know if he would be paralyzed. We didn't know if something would happen that would end up taking his life. He had multiple brain bleeds. He had a fracture to his skull. He had fracture in his neck and a fracture in his back. So we were incredibly blessed. And he was able to leave the ICU a few days later with a full back brace and a neck brace and some slurred speech and a few other things that have resolved over time. But it led us into a really hard season because, you see, my husband likes to be the driver. He doesn't like to sit in the passenger seat. And I suddenly had to be the one that drove us everywhere. I actually, as much as I like to control everything, don't really like to drive. So that was a real challenge for the two of us. And it turns out, my family will now say, I get bored when I drive too long, and I sometimes kind of swerve a little bit, like in my lane, but I swerve around a little bit because I'm getting really bored. And so everyone says that I make them car sick. And we are all very relieved that Jason just, after 3 months, got the last bit of his brace off and is able to drive again. So my family is no longer getting car sick. And I can fiddle around on my phone or read or do whatever while we go places. But all that to say, it was a really dark season. It was rough. It was hard. And in the midst of that, I did have that 12-hour long surgery because I have adult kids who kept saying, "No, mom, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. This is important." And so I did. So there for a while, we were both laid up together. We were a mess. I mean, if you saw us, like once we were moving around and we went into town, we looked sad. We were just a complete and utter mess. My husband in his brace and me kind of hobbling around, and we were something else. Um, but so it was a rough time. And so I get to the beginning of 2023, and I had found myself as we approached 2023 thinking, oh, 2023 is going to be so much better. It's going to be different. I can't wait till this is over. But then it occurred to me one day that that strike of midnight on December 31st, 2022 was not going to change our world that drastically. It really I would wake up the next day and it would be the next day. At that point, my husband still had the brace on. I still had to drive. So I saw a lot of videos on Facebook and Instagram this year, right at the beginning of the year, that started with the music that said, "It's been a year." And then you'd go through and you'd see all these videos and clips from a person's life throughout the year. Well, I had been using that 1 second per day app. And so I put my own video together. I had to condense it down to about 4 pictures a second. But it was really interesting to watch our year go through and watch all the pictures. There's so many pictures of me in hospital gowns. And then there was just this change in the tone when you got to October 11th and you start to see pictures of my husband in the hospital and pictures of us recovering. And I thought to myself, I don't want to define this year as bad because there are so many blessings that came during that time also. So I was thinking about Job, especially after a friend brought up that, well, you guys are experiencing another Job moment. Apparently, the Nelson family is known for our Job moments. And my answer was, we don't need any more children. We have enough. Thank you. Um, so Job, when he started off his little adventure, which we know probably wasn't a year, but we don't really know how long it was. He started off having so much. I mean, the man was just filled with great things. He had 7 sons and he had 3 daughters and he had 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yoke of oxen and 500 donkeys. I mean, he had it all. He had servants all over the place. And all of a sudden it just starts to fall apart and he has to feel like the world is just crumbling around him. And he doesn't know why because he's not privy to the conversation between God and Satan. And he can't comprehend. His children are gone, his animals are gone, his servants are gone. But he still reaches out to God. He still has his hope in God, right? And then Satan gets permission to do the next thing, which is to cover his body from head to toe with sores. And I can't imagine. Now he's feeling such deep internal pain at the loss of his family, loss of his children. And now that's been increased with the addition of physical pain. Anyone who's experienced great grief knows that grief has this physical heaviness to it. It has its own weight. So to add those sores, it just seems like so much torture. Job's righteousness wasn't a force field that protected him from hard times. Just because he had treated people well didn't mean that he wasn't going to have to go through tough times. All of us require refinement. So Job's friends come and they sit with him for 7 days and 7 nights and they're quiet. Now, isn't that the greatest part of this? Well, until the end. The greatest part where his friends, his 3 friends just sit in silence with him, and you think, "Oh, these are good friends." They're just sitting with him as he mourns these losses. But then 7 days in, they open their mouths. Oh my goodness. Once they opened their mouths, all the greatness of these 3 friends, it was gone, just gone, because they started to question his righteousness, and they started to say, "What kind of sin are you hiding that God did this to you?" I can't imagine the addition to the grief that Job must have been feeling. And then you have a young man who comes along and you think maybe he's going to be an encouragement, but he has his own things to say too. And oh, it's just Job's story. It feels like it just keeps crumbling further and further and further. But finally, in the midst of a storm, God speaks. And years ago, the first time I read Job, I think I had expected God's words to be words of sympathy and mercy and sweetness. But instead, God says, "Who are you? I'm God. You don't control these things. I control these things." God reminds Job that he is the created and God is the creator. In the end, Job has the opportunity to pray for his friends, to offer sacrifices, and to forgive his friends, and he is restored. He has twice as many of the sheep and the camel and the yoke of oxen and the donkeys. Here on our farm, we lease a field to some people that have one donkey. And my husband would say that one donkey is plenty of donkeys because anytime a car pulls in to the farm, there is this alert that goes out from this one donkey. So when I read this, I am just, I can't help imagining what it would be like to have 1,000 donkeys braying every time someone pulled into our driveway. So Job is restored. He again has 7 sons and 3 daughters, and we don't know what happens after, but how wonderful is that, right? So I think that there's so much that we can learn from the story of Job, so much we can learn about hope. So one of those things is that it's really important that we're teachable. Years ago, my oldest son was playing basketball and he received the coach's award. And I hadn't heard of the coach's award before this or what exactly it meant, but it was explained at the awards ceremony that this was the award that goes to the kid who is teachable. The kid who, when the coach says, "I want you to do it this way," the kid goes out and tries to do it that way. When the kid who listens and applies what he's told. So for us, we always should be striving for that coach's award. It says in 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18, "Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ." God's will for us is hope and joy. I've been reading the Screw Tape Letters. I actually just finished, and C.S. Lewis is just absolutely amazing. I think God spoke so much through C.S. Lewis, and there were a couple passages that really had me thinking. Actually, I have to tell you, about 90% of Screw Tape Letters had me feeling very convicted. But um, at one point, so Screw Tape is a devil, and he is writing letters to his nephew, Wormwood, another devil. And he's trying to teach his nephew how to better thwart God's plan for people and to bring people away from Christianity. And he says, and I'm going to change some of these words just so that it's a little easier to understand. It says, "Now it may surprise you to learn that in God's effort to get permanent possession of a soul, he relies on the trials even more than on the peaks. Some of his special favorites have gone through longer and deeper trials than anyone else. So God is using these times of trial. And in Job's circumstance, we know that it was Satan who applied these trials to Job's life, but God is not wasting anything. He doesn't waste this time at all. He uses this time to teach not only Job, but the people who surround Job more about him and about who he is. It goes on. There's another section, the Screw Tape Letters, I want to share real quickly that talks about where, as humans, we where we're placing our hope and where our thoughts are. And it says that God wants us to be thinking about the present and what we're doing right now and eternity. But Satan is hoping for us to be stuck in the past and in the future, wanting something we don't have or upset about something we didn't get. So I think that's another piece that's really important in finding joy. If we are constantly focusing on what we want but don't have or what we didn't get, how is that increasing our hope and how is that focusing us on God and eternity? So I think another thing that we learn from Job's story is that we need to pay attention to how we can be there for other people. As a fiction writer, I am very interested in how fiction affects readers. And one of the ways that that reading stories affects readers is that they tend to have a higher level of empathy for others. By reading a story, if you place yourself in the perspective of that character and you read that 90,000 words, you've now, in a way, walked in that person's shoes. So you can empathize with someone who has that same experience. I tend to write books that have some deeper subjects. I write about foster care and addiction and family dysfunction and things like that. And one of the things that was really important to me in one of my books, the way it should be, I had a character who was a struggling addict. She was an active addict during the story. And so I wrote her perspective as if we were reading her journals because I wanted people to spend some time in her shoes. That was actually I think the most important thing I've ever written. And I hope that it's one of those. I hope that the opportunity that God gave me to put that out in the world has opened people's eyes to the heart inside of people, that we're all God's children and he loves us regardless of where we come from, regardless of where we are stuck, and he wants good for all of us. When in Job's situation, those friends, they sat with him for those 7 days, but then they opened their mouths and later learned that their words were not accurate. When we read the story of Job, I hope that we learn that maybe just sitting quietly next to a friend who's grieving is better than opening our mouths and saying something that might actually hurt our friends. And in the end, Job prayed for his friends. He didn't hold on to anger. He didn't hold on to resentment. He didn't say, oh, but remember when you thought that I was hiding some secret sin? No, he did not do that. Another thing is that we are guaranteed seasons of trial. That is just part of life here on earth. It says in John, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, But take heart, I have overcome the world. Praise God, he has overcome the world. But we are going to experience hard times. And those are the times that God uses to refine us. When we know the eternal outcome, it makes our times of struggle a little easier to navigate. Refining means that we're getting rid of some of that garbage that's holding us back. It means we're being purified and we're coming closer to the image of God. In 1 Peter 1, 6-7, it says, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." How awesome is that? Today's Martin Luther King Day, Martin Luther King Jr., and I found this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that I just love. "Only in the darkness can we see the stars." Isn't that just a beautiful sentence? If we don't ever experience the darkness, we won't see the stars. So as we get closer to the end here, I want to read another verse to you that says from James, "As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. Have you heard of Job's perseverance? And you've heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy." So we remember that God is full of compassion and we remember that God is full of mercy. But we also need to remember that God is God. We need to remember who he is and place our hope in him. But we cannot contain God. He is the creator. We are the created. C.S. Lewis in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you remember that line where he says, "He's wild, you know, not like a tame lion." God cannot fit in our boxes. He cannot be molded to what it is that we want him to be. God is untamed. God is all things. God is out of our control. So we can make lists like I had before my husband's accident. We can make plans. We can have it all under our control until we can't because we're not God. So I found myself spiritually, I felt fine. I had it going on. Everything was fine until I lost control. And God really used that time to show me that it wasn't me who was making everything okay. I don't have a say in when my husband flies through the air and lands on his head. I pray that it will never happen again. But I didn't get a say in that. I didn't get a say in the BRCA1 mutation. I don't have control over what happens tomorrow or next week or next year or an hour from now or even 10 minutes from now when my husband and my kids come back into the house with the dogs. And I mean, I have 6 kids and 2 of them are still small. I have no control over anything. But it's important that we remember who God is, where our hope lies, and that we are being refined to be closer to his image. I just want to thank you all for being here so much. It's been really fun to just talk. It'd be great to be able to hear back from you. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to chat anytime, my website is justmyname.com, Christina Suzanne Nelson. Just remember not to put the E on the end of Suzanne. And pretty much on any social media, you can find me at Christina Suzanne. I really enjoy hearing from people, so feel free to drop me an email or, even my phone number is available on my website. So anytime. Um, and yeah, we're blessed people. We are blessed people. And Linda just said that so many people are hurting today. That is true. How blessed are we to be born in a country with so much wealth? How much, but even within our own country, there's so much going on. There are children who are born into households that are frightening. There are kids who are finding themselves in foster care and they are suddenly put in a home with people they've never met before and being told that this is safe. There are older people who don't have family to come visit them. We have homeless folks, and it's cold sometimes. And so we're blessed people. Let us share our blessings with the rest of the people around us. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. It's been a blessing to me, and I hope that I will hear from all of you soon.